As of late afternoon, Hurricane Irma, a Category 4. I'm Chief Meteorologist Alan Seals, and I'm giving the perspective from the central Gulf Coast of a storm that is way out in the Atlantic Ocean. It is hundreds of miles away from the eastern islands of the Caribbean, but it is moving steadily westward at 130-mile-an-hour winds. It's a major hurricane. Major means Category 3 and above. Computer models consistently take it west-northwestward, and before you even think about it striking the U.S., you've got to consider Cuba, the Bahamas, Haiti, the Dominican Republic, Puerto Rico, the Virgin Islands, and islands like Anguilla, St. Kitts. Lots and lots of people potentially going to be impacted by this system. Now, that was computer model forecast tracks. Now look at the actual wind forecast from the National Hurricane Center. Tomorrow afternoon, it could become close to a Category 5 strength before getting to the islands of the eastern Caribbean. And notice that forecast cone. And remember, the center of the storm could be anywhere within that cone, and 1/3 of the time it actually does go outside of the cone. But many of us in the U.S. are focusing on the tail end of this system. Now, that's Saturday afternoon, a projection by 2 o'clock. And when you look at that projected cone, it means the center of the storm could be in the central Bahamas. It could be on Cuba. It could be in the Caribbean if it takes a more southerly track. But what this cone doesn't show you is what happens after Saturday. It's only natural for your eye to take this and extend it forward, but that's not necessarily the case. Think back to last year, Hurricane Hermine started off of Cuba, got into the Gulf, and then made a rapid turn back toward northeast Florida. Think this year, Hurricane Harvey made landfall in Texas, stopped, backtracked, curved around, and then went to the northeast. So beyond this extended forecast, lots of different scenarios. And day by day, meteorologists are looking at information like this. Computer models that use science, calculus, math, physics, and lots of equations to try to integrate temperature, pressure, humidity, wind, ocean temperature, ocean salinity at many different points around the globe. And that's because hurricanes may seem like one little spot, but they're controlled by a huge environment. And the big issue when storms are out at sea is we don't have that much data. We have a lot of satellite data, but we don't have weather balloons, not many ships. We occasionally send a hurricane hunter plane into the storm to measure it, and all of that data goes into making computer forecasts that generate a spaghetti plot. And the spaghetti plots are a big part of what goes into making the forecast cone. Let's say one day later you say most of the spaghetti plot models put it in this general location. You draw a circle. 2 days later, they start to spread out more. The circle gets bigger. 3 days later, it gets even bigger. All of that tells you you are less certain in the future where it's going to be. But that's not the only thing that goes into the forecast, because if it were, you wouldn't have human beings actually making the forecast. We have to use climatology, average weather conditions, and then the knowledge of a meteorologist. So keep in mind, the center of the storm is what that cone tells you. It doesn't tell you the wind speed. It doesn't tell you the impact. And what you always have to remember is the storm could go outside of that cone 1/3 of the time. So right now, Irma, it's a Category 4. 130-mile-an-hour winds. On social media, people are seeing something about Category 6. That's a hoax. Don't believe it. There's no such thing on the Saffir-Simpson hurricane scale. There was a movie called Category 6 back in 2004, but either way, we have to watch this very carefully. Current steering winds pushing it toward the west. High pressure to the north, part of the Bermuda high, but all of these winds will change in the next couple of days, and that's why we'll also look at a disturbance in the southern Gulf that has a small possibility of becoming a tropical system, and then another disturbance back in the central Atlantic that has a medium possibility of becoming a tropical system. Keep in mind, we are now in the peak of hurricane season, so it's not unusual to see multiple systems out there. This is also the time where, if you think back in history, we tend to see the long track storms, the bigger storms, simply because the ocean is warmest compared to any other time of the year. Now, hurricane season runs through the end of November, and we will keep watching, we'll keep updating what's going on. And remember, Irma, it's a Category 4. By tomorrow, the day after, we may see new data that gives us a whole different picture. But right now, the main area of concern is the northern Caribbean, the southern Bahamas, and by the weekend it could be Cuba, it could be South Florida. After Saturday, it is very possible this could take a very sharp turn. So all of the state of Florida right now, as far as the U.S. is concerned, that's the #1 area where people have to really be on guard. I'm Chief Meteorologist Alan Seals. Make sure you always have a safety plan.